Yeah, so it's clear that this student is struggling. Um, yeah, let me look at that again. Some emails break the heart. Not making this more dramatic than it is, but yeah, no, he's dealing with a common trap, I should say, I'll call it, that many student pilots fall into, unintentionally and unknowingly. So let me explain what I mean. Here we have a situation where the student started flight training and has set a set date and time almost. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but they set a bar for them to meet at a certain point, where in their own mind, if and when they do meet that bar on that date, they are a successful student pilot, meaning in their own mind, in their head, they're doing things right. But if they don't meet their goal, and the goal could be anything, it could be landing, it could be soloing, it could be a check ride. If they don't meet that on the date that they set mentally, then in their own mind, they are less of a successful pilot. This is a giant issue that I don't think many or enough student pilots understand how big of an issue it is. And I know this because I didn't understand this as a student pilot. And I happen to know many student pilots. And unless I tell and talk about these things with them, it almost doesn't occur to them that it's hurting them. So let me give you an example of what I mean that has nothing to do with aviation. Why setting a time at which you will be or do something could work and be great in many other areas of life, but hurts you in the aviation flight training arena, okay? There was someone I knew in my life who was a very close friend of mine. They're still a close friend of mine. But at the time of the story, they were closer than they are today. And I knew a lot about them. They shared a lot with me. They opened up, the whole thing. And one thing they were dealing with was their weight. They struggled with weight. They constantly, I didn't think they were that big, but they constantly were looking to lose weight, get skinnier, get smaller, lose weight. And when this person, I don't know what age they were, but they told me at some point in the past, when they were younger, for whatever reason, they came up in their own mind with a number, a weight on the scale that only when they reach that weight will they be not overweight. And that thought process, again and again and again, being hammered into the brain, over time seemed to have create a situation where that person has gone from thinking that once they reach that weight, they no longer will be fat, to kind of living life believing that only when they reach that weight will they be happy. And it started seeping into their happiness and their self-image. And it started going well far beyond just their weight. And it kind of turned their whole life into, unless I'm under that weight, I'm a no good. And that spiraled into a big giant issue, which spanned over many years. Thankfully, they got some help. But that was something I was able to witness very firsthand, and see how detrimental our brain could be if we don't grab a hold of it and show it who's boss, right? take that example into the aviation arena, right? Let's bring that same idea, that same concept into flight training. We have a student, and this is way more common than people watching this might realize if you're not an active student or if you're not a CFI, which deals with many students. This is happening all day long out there, where student pilots will, in their own mind, right? And these are people, I think it comes from the fact that these are people who come into the flight training world from the outside world, from running successful companies or being go-getters. Like, it's all great things and great people. And they bring along with them these methods, these ways of going about things that might not be as successful in flight training as it might be with running your company, or as it might be with 100 other things they're doing in their life, right? Where goal setting is vital. So they come into flight training and they start flight training. And then all of a sudden, that brain that lived their entire life with goals, right? Which is not a bad thing. They all of a sudden, at some point, for whatever reason, who knows how they came up with that date or whatever it is, they say, I'm going to land on this day. And from that point on, there's little that happens in their brain, other than I'm going to land on that day. And that day rolls around. 20% of them land on that day, but let me tell you what happens with the other 80%. They don't land on that day. Okay? They might land a week later. They might land the next day. But for whatever reason, for how life works, they don't all land on that day. The stars don't align in such a way where that day rolls around and now, boom, they could land an airplane. And what happens once that day comes and goes and they haven't landed is frustration starts seeping in. And over time, slowly but surely, the voice they start hearing is, I'm a good for nothing, right? I set out to land last Tuesday and I couldn't make it happen. If I can't make that happen, what else could I not make happen? And over time, if this is not dealt with and caught and really cut and chopped off of the flight training arena or out of the flight training arena, this becomes detrimental. And it affects the student in ways that goes far beyond, that initial goal that they set of soloing on such and such date. Horrible. And so the biggest thing I could tell you, the biggest piece of advice that I want you to take away from this video is goals are phenomenal. You got into this flight training business thing, you got into this whole thing to obtain a private pilot certificate or an instrument rating or a commercial pilot certificate, whatever it might be. Goals are fantastic, right? Without goals, we wouldn't get anywhere. We wouldn't do anything. But it's unbelievably important to recognize and to be able to distinguish between a goal that is going to help me and a goal that is going to hurt me. All right, I'll say that again. Understanding the difference between a goal that is going to help me and a goal that is going to hurt me. So you might say, what do you mean a goal that is going to hurt me? Well, when you start flight training, there's one thing only that you have control over. And I hate breaking it to you, but you don't have control over when you're going to land a plane for the first time. You do have control over giving every single flight lesson your best in moving you forward towards the goal of landing an airplane. Do you hear the difference? Showing up and saying, I'm going to land in a month, is a goal. but it's a goal that you set for yourself that's based off of nothing you have control over. You and I both don't know when you will be ready to land an airplane. You know, if you show up to me to flight train together, I could have done flight training. I could have been an instructor for 500 years, hypothetically, and I still wouldn't know when you will be able to land an airplane. You wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. Even a week in, I wouldn't know. Now, a week in, I would have a much better idea of approximately the period of time we might be looking at, because at that point I'd get a pretty good idea of the type of learner, the speed at which you pick up new concepts, the hand-eye coordination that you have, your ability to learn new concepts and implement them quickly. Sure, I'll have a really good idea of approximately what this journey is going to look like with you specifically. But even I wouldn't be able to say, hey, you could land this plane in 4 weeks or 3 weeks, right? Maybe you'll be able to land it in 2 weeks, despite the fact that I thought it's going to be 3 weeks, or maybe it'll be 2 months, whatever it might be. So we don't know. So setting a goal that involves nothing more than a date and something you're going to do on that date is fine. But if that's all you set and that's your only focus, my only focus is I'm going to solo or I'm going to land on whatever. I'm just using the example of land, but take any example in flight training. If all you do is set that goal and the goal involves doing something on a specific date and that's it, you're shooting yourself in the foot, because it's a baseless goal. There's nothing about that goal that you could control. Now, on the other hand, if your goal sounds something like this: my goal is to show up and to do whatever I can on my end in order to set me up for the most amount of success so that I could land this airplane sooner rather than later and do so safely, efficiently, proficiently, and whichever other word you want to use. If that is your goal, the reason that's a goal that I call a goal that will help you is because everything about that goal is within your control. Now, mind you, there's not one talk about a date or a time that has to do with that goal. I did not talk about a time. I did not talk about a date in the future. All I talked about with that goal was I am going to show up and do whatever I can do in order to make this dream of mine a reality. And yeah, sooner rather than later, that would be ideal, right? But again, there's no date involved. And don't get me wrong, I'm the first one to tell you that I'm a big fan of goals that do involve dates and times. I have many of them. If you look through the notes in my phone, I have goals that involve dates. I'm a big fan of them. But specifically, we're talking about flight training. Showing up and tying any date in the future to you doing or being anything, I have found oftentimes hurts the student more so than it helps them. So to wrap this video up, or this topic up, I should say, I'm not asking you to not set goals. I'm not asking you to aim lower than you're aiming, not even a little bit. Okay, I'm a huge fan of goal setting. In fact, if you're someone who sets goals and you set them really high, I have a tremendous amount of respect for you, because good on you, man. This is not an easy thing. You show up to flight training and everything is just new and unfamiliar, and you're learning how to operate in 3D space. It's crazy stuff, right? And on top of that, to show up and say, here's a goal I'm setting for myself, that's commendable, and I respect that. But what I want you to take home from this video, from this topic that we're talking about here, is remember, there's goals that hurt you and there's goals that help you. And I found that if there's a date, typically if there's a date associated with a goal in flight training, and I should say this too, everything I'm talking about here is especially true when you're first starting out. Here's what I mean. If you've been at flight training for 4, 5, 6, 7 months, whatever it's been, at that point, you're pretty familiar with the whole process and you know yourself much better than you do when you first got into the airplane. So if you set a goal 6 months in to where, next month on blah, 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 I'm holding myself to doing X, Y, Z, that could work and that could actually be a goal that helps you, right? And oftentimes, we see it with written tests all the time. Many students, it's a fascinating thing, many students go for months and they struggle, they kind of drag their feet in the sand when it comes to written test prep. So they have all the software and they have all the apps and the stuff on their iPad, and just getting a practice test done is just, it's so difficult and I don't have the time, and it's just the whole thing. And then a fascinating thing happens. We schedule the test, or they schedule the test, and something goes off in their head. They know the test is scheduled. They know it's next month on Tuesday. And guess what? They're at it. They're producing written tests, practice written tests like nobody's business. Okay? So that's a fascinating kind of concept, right? It's a human concept, right? There's a deadline and you feel that pressure. And many people with a deadline, they know it's coming up. They do well under that pressure and it helps them. So that's a goal that helps them. But again, that type of goal on day one or on week one, no bueno. No bueno. It's no good. It's no good. So that's what I'm referring to. If you just started flight training and you've been trying to land a plane for a few weeks and it's not easy and it's weird and it's scary, and it is a concept you often go to sleep at night questioning whether or not you'll ever figure out. Don't set a time in the future to where you hold yourself to land the airplane. That is just pressure that will get you nowhere, and you have no control over that. Instead, take all that energy, take all of that time that you spend setting that goal and move it into the realm of, what could I do to land this plane safely? Meaning, is there anything that I could be doing that I'm not, that I could start implementing? Whatever it might be. It could be reading at home. Maybe the concept is weird for you. It could be maybe another session with your instructor once a week. Maybe you're only flying once or twice a week and you need to fly 3 times a week. Maybe you're flying, or to the contrary, maybe you're flying 5 times a week. And at that point, you're not learning anything because you're tired and you don't have time to study at home and breathe, and it's overwhelming. So that could also be detrimental. So it might be going from 5 to 3. Or from 1 to 3, whatever it might be. You know yourself best. But committing to yourself and setting the goal of, I am going to do whatever I can do on my end, in whatever way that might look like, in order to get me to a point where I could safely and efficiently land this airplane with no dates involved. And that way, you will never reach a date to where if you haven't done that thing, you will feel horrible with yourself for no good reason. There's no reason for you to feel that way. So if you kind of keep the date thing out of it, especially when you start out, I found you'll do much better because you won't be beating yourself up, and you'll continuously look for ways, in ways that you can control, to make sure that you reach your goals of landing, soloing, check ride, whatever it might be, and kill it, like kick it out of the park like nobody's business, because you've spent the past month or 2 months or whatever it is really holding yourself accountable and showing up, and with all of you, to make sure that this goal of yours is going to be executed to the best, in the best possible way. So that's my 2 cents today. Goals that can hurt you, goals that can help you. Remember, I'm a big fan of goals. I'm not even against goals that have dates, but when you're first starting out in this flight training thing, keep the dates out of it. Anytime you set a goal, the best thing you could ask yourself is, how much of this goal, meaning what percentage of my goal that I just set, do I have direct control over? And if you find that the answer is not much, sometimes there might be a date involved, or you might just have to switch that goal up a little bit. But make sure that whatever goal you set is something that you have the ability to control its outcome. So there we have it. Until next time, fly safe, and I will see you on the next topic.